Our first recipe is going to be a decadent chocolate cake. So for this recipe, we will be making a chocolate cake base. We will fill it with chocolate buttercream and glaze it with chocolate ganache. Before we start baking, we have to prepare our baking pans and preheat the oven. So for this recipe, I am using a 1-inch height pan that is 8 inches diameter, or if you don't have any of these pans, you can also use a 2-inch high pan that is around 8-inch diameter. Now, the pan preparation for this is we brush the bottom with shortening, and then we align it with grease-proof paper, or you can also use silicone paper for this. Now, aside from the pan preparation, you have to preheat your oven. Now, the temperature that we are using here is 325 degrees Fahrenheit. So once you have the pans prepared and the oven preheated, we'll go and move into the mixing of our ingredients. So now that you have prepared the baking pan and preheated the oven, we'll start mixing our dry ingredients. So we have here all-purpose flour, cocoa powder. So for this, we are using Beryl's cocoa powder. You have granulated white sugar. We have salt, baking powder, and baking soda. So what I'm actually doing here is I am sifting all the ingredients together. So, you know, it's very important to sift all the ingredients together just so it would be well mixed, okay? You don't want your dry ingredients to have spots of like baking powder or baking soda, or else your cake would not rise evenly. And also, baking soda is actually, it is a little bit bitter. So if it's not well mixed, then you can have a spot of your cake that's a little bit bitter. So you need to make sure that the ingredients are well mixed together and sifted. So what I do is I sift the ingredients before I measure them, and after measuring them, I sift it again to aerate my ingredients so I can have a more finer crumb. So you would notice here that the dry ingredients I have is almost well incorporated. So I'll finish it using my rubber spatula, or what you can also do is actually sift this 3 times. So you can prepare 2 bowls and just alternately sift the ingredients until you have well mixed dry ingredients, just like this. Okay. All right. So now we will be preparing our liquid ingredients. So for this, you will need buttermilk, but for this, I'm using evaporated milk, or you can also use Conaprole full cream milk. So this is about a cup. And to make buttermilk, I usually just use evaporated milk or full cream milk, and I add about 1 tablespoon of cane vinegar. And then we set this aside. The very reason why I'm using buttermilk is that it makes the cake extra moist. After 5 minutes, you will notice that this will start to curdle. So before we continue adding the rest of the liquid ingredients, we'll have to mix the coffee powder into our boiling water. And then we stir it. And now we'll add oil to the buttermilk and eggs. So the eggs should be at room temperature. So using a wire whisk, we'll mix in the buttermilk, oil, and eggs until you create a smooth mixture. Now, for this chocolate cake, we are using a 2-bowl stage method, so which means that we have a separate bowl for our dry ingredients and we have another bowl for our liquid ingredients. Now, what we're going to do next is we will create a well at the center of the bowl and then add in the egg, oil, and buttermilk mixture. So using a wire whisk, we'll stir this until we create a smooth batter. Okay, so once you created a smooth batter, we will gradually add the hot water and coffee powder mixture. So we'll slowly add this into our cake batter here. So the coffee actually enhances the flavor of the chocolate. So also it makes the chocolate cake darker. All right, so we'll do 4 additions, about 1/4 cup at a time. Okay, so this is perfect for anyone who does not have any mixers at home because this cake does not require you to use a mixer. However, if you have mixers at home, you can also use your stand mixer or hand mixer. But for those who doesn't have mixers, you can definitely make this at home. Okay, so we'll put another 1/4 cup. So remember guys that the coffee mixture we have is 1 cup. So add about 1/4 cup of the coffee mixture at a time. Okay, so make sure that the coffee mixture is well incorporated into the batter before you add the next addition of the coffee mixture. So once you have mixed all the coffee mixture into the cake batter, you have to whisk it for another minute to make sure that the ingredients are well combined. So expect that, you know, the cake batter will be a little bit on the thinner side. This cake is actually very moist, and you can also use this recipe for your chocolate cupcakes. Okay, so once you have incorporated everything in, we'll divide this cake batter into 4 and we'll bake this in our preheated oven. Now that we have our cake batter, so we can always check it out to make sure that that is smooth. And now we're ready to divide this into 4. So I have here a ladle. You can also actually pour this right away into, or you can use like a liquid measuring cup to portion it. Ideally, no, if you have to make sure that every baking pan has the same amount of cake batter, what you can do is actually weigh the batter and then divide it by 4. But this one I just do my estimates. Okay, so this one should be all set. Now that we have our cake batter into portion sized into our baking pan, we'll bake this in our preheated oven at 325 degrees Fahrenheit for about 20 minutes. The next recipe is the Italian meringue buttercream. So for this, we will make an Italian meringue and then we'll add butter into the Italian meringue to make it an Italian meringue buttercream. So Italian meringue is actually a cooked meringue, meaning you make simple syrup, you boil it until around soft ball stage, and then you pour the hot syrup into the egg white. So the heat coming from the syrup itself will actually cook the egg whites, making the meringue more stable. So this is actually the kind of buttercream that I use for making my sharp edge cakes when I do wedding cakes or birthday cakes. So for this buttercream, I'm actually doing double recipe because I'm using one part of it into our mile high chocolate cake and the other portion will be used for the glazed ube yema cake roll. So for this, you will need a thick saucepan, and to this we'll put in sugar. So that's sugar and water. Okay, so we will cook this in around medium heat until this reaches around 240 degrees Fahrenheit on a candy thermometer. Now, a lot of you may not have a candy thermometer at home, so I can put out a video on how to check, the stages of the syrup later on. So for this, you will have to cook this at 240 before you actually pour it into the beaten egg whites. While we are making the syrup, let's prepare the egg whites. So I have here room temperature egg whites. We have here a clean bowl. Make sure that this is really clean or else these egg whites will not foam. So this is room temperature egg whites. And then we have the cream of tartar. Again, if you don't have any cream of tartar, you can use calamansi juice or lemon juice. So at this point, we will beat the egg whites once the syrup starts to spin like a thread. So in cases where you would see sugar recrystallization around the sides of the pan, I have here a brush, a wet brush, and then just clean up the sides. Okay. So this is actually thread stage. This is 220. If you notice how the syrup actually drops, it forms a thread towards its towards the last drops. Okay. At this point, we will start beating the egg whites. Now let's check. We are at 230. We are just about 10 degrees away to go for soft ball stage. So this is how I check it. So I get a portion of the syrup, dip it in cold water, and then if you could form like a soft ball, that is a softball stage. So I believe we are at softball stage. So this is how it should look like. You can form the syrup into a ball, but it's still very soft. Okay. So this is a time where we actually pour the syrup into the egg whites. Now we pour the syrup gradually on the sides. And we'll continue to beat this until the meringue is at room temperature. Okay, so now let's check. The bottom of the bowl is already at room temperature, or it's cool to touch. Now I'm adding in butter. So the butter is actually a little bit in between of the soft and chilled. But I guess if you're doing this in the Philippines, you have to use a butter that's chilled because of the weather conditions you guys have. Okay, so gradually add the butter and continue beating this until you finish adding up the butter and you have a smooth buttercream. So this is actually your standard Italian buttercream. Without the butter, this is your boiled icing. Now this buttercream is actually very versatile because this is your basic Italian buttercream, and you can play around, you know, different flavors. You can add mocha flavoring or coffee. You can also add chocolate. You may add ube or any of the fruit purees to add variety to this buttercream. Okay, so keep adding the butter. So one recipe of this would cover actually a 9-inch cake, but I did double recipe to cover our chocolate cake and our ube roll. Okay, I think our buttercream is done. Let's take a look. Okay, we got a very smooth buttercream. Now we'll set this aside and we'll put the appropriate flavor. So for our chocolate buttercream, we will be adding melted chocolate, and for our yama buttercream, we will add a portion of the cooked yama that we made earlier to the buttercream. The next component of our mile-high chocolate cake is our chocolate buttercream. So here I have prepared the Italian meringue buttercream earlier, and then we will flavor it with melted chocolate. So here I have Beryl's chocolate. You can either use chocolate chips or the chocolate compound, or you can use couverture depending on what you want. So Beryl's has a good line of chocolate which you can use from. There's a chip form, there's a mini and the macros, and there's also the compound chocolate. There's also the couverture chocolate. So if you want a more sophisticated taste to your chocolate buttercream, I would suggest use couverture. However, if you are intending to use this or sell this, you know, for business with a median price point, I would say you can use compound chocolate. But in the absence of both, if you have chocolate chips at home, you could also use your favorite chocolate chips. Of course, here I am using Beryl. So we'll melt this over a pan of simmering water. So I have simmering water here. So I'm just gonna put my bowl of chocolate on top of the simmering water, leave it for about 5 minutes until the chocolate starts to melt, and then we'll start stirring the chocolate to completely melt the chocolate. Okay, now that we have our chocolate melted, we'll add a little bit of the buttercream into the chocolate. And we'll mix it into the rest of our Italian meringue buttercream. Now that we have prepared our chocolate buttercream, we will set this aside and we will start preparing our cakes. So we have here our cakes that was already baked. So this cake, we used Beryl's cocoa powder. So we actually made 4 layers of this cake. Now, what I'm going to do is to actually slice this into 2 so we can create 8 layers. So 8 layers of cake and 8 layers of buttercream for a total of 16 layers. So this is going to be a little bit, this is going to be a tall cake actually. Okay, so now let's remove the cake from the cake pan. So loosen the sides. This is a very moist cake. This is actually better if you chill the cake before you actually try to slice them so the crumbs are tighter. So what I'm gonna do is, using a serrated knife, okay, so this is 2 layers now, and then we'll do this for the rest of the layers of the cake. Okay, so now we are ready to assemble our cake. So this is the first layer. Take out that paper, and then we got our chocolate buttercream. We spread it evenly. So here at the bottom I have a board which is of the same size as the cake. I love our Italian buttercream. It's very smooth, very silky. So make sure that that's even. All right, so we put on the next layer of cake. And we repeat the process until we finish all the layers of cake and buttercream. Okay. And then we put on the next one. Now that we have finished putting all our layers, we will cover this cake with chocolate buttercream. Okay, so I have here an angled spatula. Starting from the center, push the icing to the side. For this, we'll use a bench scraper to make sure that the sides are even. Okay. Pull the ice into the center. Let's do Okay, so this is our chocolate cake. We will chill this at least 4 hours or better overnight before we glaze it. Now to finish off our mile high chocolate cake, we will apply a chocolate glaze on top of the chocolate buttercream. So for this type of chocolate glaze, I'm actually just using a chocolate ganache that's more liquid than the regular chocolate ganache. So for this you will need dark chocolate, or you can use chocolate compound or chocolate couverture. For this I'm using couverture chocolate. We also have here butter. We have the Master Martini Gold Heavy Cream, and we also have light corn syrup to give it a nice sheen on the ganache. So first is I'll put the cream into a saucepan, and we will warm this until simmering stage. Okay? So let's warm this up at medium heat. Alright, so our heavy cream is now simmering. I'm just going to take this off the fire. Okay, and I'm going to add our light corn syrup. And butter. Okay. So we're just gonna have to stir this until the butter is melted into the heavy cream. So for this we're using the Master Martini Gold Heavy Cream. Now we also have a wide range of heavy creams at the Global Pacific stores, so you can check them out at the Global Pacific page. Okay. So once the butter is melted, we'll pour it into our chocolate. So for this recipe, I'm using a chocolate couverture. So chocolate couverture has a more fine taste because of the cocoa butter that's used into the couverture chocolate. But if you are trying to cut the cost of your cake without sacrificing, of course, the quality, you can also use the compound chocolate. Okay, so our butter is still not melted. We're going to continue stirring this until this is all melted. Okay, so now we're going to pour this into our chocolate, and we'll set this aside for about 5 to 10 minutes, and then we'll start stirring it until we create a smooth ganache that's going to glaze our chocolate cake. All right. After 5 minutes, we'll stir our chocolate and cream together until we create a smooth glaze. Now we got our chocolate ganache glaze done. We will set this aside to cool this down a little bit, just so when we pour it over our buttercream frosted cake, that the buttercream won't actually melt. So that is a key element in glazing your cake. So make sure that the base of your cake is really cold. Now what I usually do is I chill the cakes at least overnight, or 4 hours minimum, before glazing it, just so the buttercream is well set and that the ganache would just really flow very well to the sides of our cake. Now while our chocolate ganache is cooling down, let's prepare the equipment that we need to use for the glazing. So I have here a jelly roll pan, and I line it with a cling film because it's easier to actually take the drippings or the glaze that's dripping off the cake. If we have this cling film on the jelly roll pan. So now let's check our glaze. So this is almost at room temperature now. I will set a cake rack here and then I'll take out the cake from the refrigerator. Now this is our chilled cake. We have here our prepared chocolate glaze. So what I will do is start from the center, going to the sides and out. Now you could actually still reuse the ganache that's on the tray. So then I also have here our angled spatula. So just sweep and then that's it. Okay, then we'll chill this to set our glaze. Now let's make our mile-high chocolate cake even more special by adding in some chocolate decoration. So for this episode, I'll teach you a very quick and simple chocolate decoration in which you can use for this chocolate cake or any of your celebration cakes. Now for this, we'll make some sort of chocolate nest that we will be putting on top of our chocolate cake. So I have here a bowl of ice. I put in some water and this is melted white chocolate. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I'll snip. Okay, and then we'll pipe circles. Okay. Okay, so this hardened now. So got that done. So this is our chocolate nest. We'll make some more. Okay, so I have here chocolate, the white chocolate that we used to make our decorations. I'm just gonna pipe a dot and then we'll put a piece of the Ferrero chocolate and then same thing here. And we'll put something around here. Okay, then with this nest that we made, I'm gonna put it on in between the Ferrero chocolate that we did. Okay, so there you go, our mile-high chocolate cake.